you're coaching folks on the media strategy and how to handle these situations.
There's actually an anatomy to the media interview.
How do you feel about that in terms of storytelling?
It's all about story power, right? And we always say, make it personal, make it visual, make it visceral. Don't forget emotion. But the package that comes in has to be concise.
If you're a leader, if you're anyone that is responsible for presentations, this is going to be a great episode. Today, we're talking about the art of the interview. And I'd like to think I have a lot of experience doing this for 20 years, but I am sitting here with Sarah Ross from Braithwaite Communications, PR guru. And we're going to give you all the tools you need, tips and tricks to perform your best. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Jon.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on Beyond the Frame. So Sarah, first, just so people know, I've known you for years, but
yes.
So people know who you are and what you do. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. So I work at Braithwaite Communications, and I am an executive vice president there, and I've been there for 20 years. So kind of like a unicorn in the business. Most people haven't been at one company their whole lives, but I have.
Yeah, in like any industry.
In like any industry, right? Especially in this day and age. When I started at Braithwaite, we were a public relations firm that specialized in crisis management. So we used to say we keep half of our clients in the news, half of our clients out of the news. Through the years, we've evolved into a full service integrated marketing agency. So we do almost everything in the earned, owned, paid, and shared space. So everything from earned media being your PR and thought leadership, owned media being your own content, internal comms. We intersect with video.
Yep. We've got to work together a few times. We got to work
together, which is awesome. Paid being like your advertising, sponsorships, that kind of thing. Paid social, and then shared being, organic social. So really been lucky to kind of watch the whole marketing landscape evolve. But PR and earned media has always been kind of my passion and something at the heart of what I do and what I love. I still pitch the media all the time. I also love to teach about it through media trainings. So I'm really excited to talk about it today.
I love it. Yeah. And I think that there's so many intersections, and when we talked off camera about where we fall, and we kind of at times have the same goals when it's the own media, but a lot of times there's different strategies for the same, effective output. Whether if I'm interviewing somebody, it's usually own content. Yep. It's trying to get them to be their best. You have people that are, they are being blitzed by the media, and that media isn't always looking out for your client's best interest, I assume. So let's talk a little bit about the media training up front and start in there. What are some of the things that, and I love to do the value exchange. So what are things that people can pick up right now that they can do better?
Well, first, I want to kind of piggyback on what you just said, because we always say the media is not out to get you. They're just out to tell a good story. They need characters, villains, heroes, right? They often also will dive into to topics with pretty shallow knowledge. So it depends on the actual reporter, right? But you could get a reporter at the TV station who 20 minutes before, they're sending their reporter over with a camera to cover your client's event or to head over to their headquarters. So it's our job to get our clients ready to effectively share their messages at any point, right? So we always tell them before you start an interview, and I think this would really intersect with what you do as well, think about two key things, right? One is, what messages am I effectively trying to communicate, right? And what is going to be the impact to the readers, viewers, or listeners, right? So it's not about your business, right? And not about just promoting your business. It's about how that you can ultimately help the people, or why it's interesting to the people that are listening, reading, or viewing it, right?
So it's so funny you say that, because even right now in this moment, and we talked about this with this podcast, with any time that we've coached clients that are doing video podcasts or content, I call it the value exchange, right? So you are asking for their time and attention, and you need to give value in exchange for that. And it's not monetary, right? It has to be either entertaining or educational, or ideally both. So I don't know if maybe we should go into an anecdote. Is there an example you could give, or like, how do we frame that up for somebody to be ready in front of the media, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I know what the message that I want to get across is, but I know, for example, when we talk about doing a brand film for somebody, you sit somebody in the chair, you sit a CEO in the chair, and you ask them to talk about the services that they offer, their expertise. They could go on and on and on. You ask them to talk about themselves, and everything shuts down, right? It's because it's a lot harder to do, and there's like 50 different thoughts intersecting at the same time. So how do you sort of organize that and help them?
Well, I would say, first of all, like when it comes to media interviews versus a presentation, I think there's this big unknown. It seems like this big, scary thing. And a lot of times we'll talk to clients and they say, I have no idea what kinds of questions they're going to ask me. And there's this fear involved with the unknown. So part of what we try to do is kind of cut through the clutter and say, actually, there's actually an anatomy to the media interview, right? And initially, right, they're going to be in their meeting. They want to talk to you because you're a thought leader. You're a topic expert. That's really the difference between earned media and paid media getting to it, right? So rather than seeing an ad, right, they're talking to our clients because they're thought leaders. They're subject matter experts, right? So what do they want to talk to you about? We also know they're going to talk to other sources, good and bad, right? So our goal is to get our clients ready to effectively communicate their messages and not just answer all the questions, right? It's actually to lead the interview, right? So there's a couple ways that we get them to do that.
Okay.
One is, first of all, when we think about kind of the architecture of the interview, we have 3 key components. We talk about that as either at Braithwaite, illumination, differentiation, invitation, which is really illumination is your context message. So rather than just starting, right, with, hi, I'm Sarah, I work at Braithwaite, here's what I do, I'm going to back into the crisis that I'm solving or the context, the larger picture of why I'm being interviewed, right? So you're backing into like the state of the industry, a higher level problem that you're solving, or something really cool that's happening that you have an answer to, right?
Okay.
Then you dive into your branded message, right? And then there's the call to action to the people that are listening, watching, reading, right? So really, first of all, there's understanding that 3-part structure and giving the reporters the context you want to start from, not the context that they want to start from, right?
Okay, so we didn't talk about this off camera, so I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Yeah.
Can we do an exercise?
Absolutely.
So how do you want to do it? How do we do it? Do we pick a client? Do you want to, am I your guinea pig? How do you want to do it? Okay.
Let's do you. So let's pretend I'm Sarah. I'm with a local TV news network, right?
Okay.
And I am giving you the opportunity. I'm talking about major businesses in the Philadelphia area, the evolution of businesses in the Philadelphia area, and I want to talk to you about it, right? So
first I need illumination. I need to back into it.
Right.
With my experience. Is that correct?
Right. So there could be, we always tell our clients it's a choice, right? So you could talk about kind of starting off the state of video production in Philadelphia. Is it a crowded market? I actually don't know that, right? But is it a crowded market? What caused you to come in here? Or you could talk about the state of marketing and owned media and why it's such a powerful tool, and how it's evolved and become one of the most effective tools for any company, right? So you pick the place you want to start, then you give kind of your unique branded message, right?
So when you asked the question about the state of business in general, my move would have been probably, as someone in a video production company, we've been working with a lot of businesses, large and small, throughout the Philadelphia area for years. So we have visibility to how they market, how they create content, how they share their message, and have an idea based on that of who they are and what kind of businesses are either thriving or not thriving in the Philadelphia area. That was my instinct to back into it.
That's good, but I'm going to push
you. Critique me.
Let me push you farther. So I want to take Jon back to when you actually started. What caused you to get into this industry?
It's a bad story. I fell into it, right? I had
That's so crazy.
Well, I don't know if it's a bad story. I would say, well, we'll go 2 ways. I'll give you like the real in-depth version, and then we can take the high level, right? Yep. So I think that, this used to be Video City, which was a video rental store, mom and pop shop, VHS, DVDs. That's what my dad started back in '82. And I grew up in this store, right? So grew up around video. We, as a mom and pop shop, could do whatever we want. So we weren't like Blockbuster or West Coast. So we started doing video transfer, taking old family videos, converting them to digital, those sort of things, which taught me that space, and taught me how to edit and those types of things. And then in 2006, 7, 8, you could start to see, obviously, Netflix and streaming were taking over video rentals. Video transfer became more prominent, which opened the door to video production. And it was really just following that path, right? So it was a little bit of just reacting, seeing how the market was changing, reacting to it, and finding new opportunities. And I've transitioned through that in my career from the video rental space to video transfer. That transitioned us into video post-production, which then made us realize, hey, we should start shooting the stuff because If we shot it better, then we could edit it easier, which opened the door into personal events, which is where I cut my teeth in the beginning of my career, weddings and mitzvahs and that sort of thing. And then we started growing into the corporate clients, and now that's exclusively what we do. And we have this thriving team that does that. So as my PR person, you probably would go way too much, Jon, but I wanted you to have that background to help coach me.
No, I love what you actually had really strong story power. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to tell a good story, right? And the story that I really heard you tell was one of evolution, right? Industry evolution. And also it's that intersection between what's happening in the market, right? Watching as like we're going from like VHS to where we are today to your personal evolution, right?
Yep.
So I think if I am, a local TV news station profiling businesses in Philadelphia, right? And I talk to you, I would start from the place of in today's evolving landscape, you know what I mean? In the world of where marketing mediums continue to grow, we see the role of, you can get the role of AI, the role of everything.
Right.
Video has been a transformative medium through the years, both personally and professionally. And at Video City Productions, we're able to hone that in these 3 key ways.
Got it.
So I would start with the evolution, dovetail into your personal story, and then get into kind of the 3 key things that you guys do differently from anyone else.
Got it. Okay. Love it. Right.
And sometimes the strongest way to do that is backing into a stat by saying, you know what I mean? You could say, how many video production companies there are, worldwide now. Right. You could start by talking about kind of the role that video plays in overall marketing structures when you look at companies across the country. You know what I mean? The role that video has, started to play. So it's just kind of giving that larger context that you guys have a unique answer to. Or sometimes it's a problem. So you could also say, there was a recent stat that said that I'm making this up, but I'm just going to say, but we find stats all the time, and sometimes we help our clients create them by doing original surveys and data, because we're always looking for that research. But it could also start with a stat about that, in today's world, companies are fighting for share of voice. And 50% or 60% of clients say that they feel the most powerful messages are shared through video.
Sure.
We capitalize on that through the following.
Right. Got it. So
you're backing into why you're different and unique.
So really quick moment to step away from the example and just kind of take a bird's eye view. What I really like is I'm seeing, and we talked about this at the hook of this episode, is going from victim to leader, right? Sure. So what's funny is when you first frame the question, I think because we talk about crisis management and media, you think about media adversarially, I immediately was going to like, okay, they're asking this question about business in Philadelphia.
Right.
Let's go into my experience of understanding lots of businesses as a video producer. Your point, I was even staying maybe closer to what the original question was, and you could see that even maybe plays a little bit into a victim, right? Where you went, no, we're leading. We're going to shift the messaging over to what we want to talk about and the way we want to talk about it. There's a second thing that I saw, which is preparedness, right?
Sure.
There's stats, there's surveys, there's all kinds of work that's going in up front to prepare you for that moment.
Yeah. 2 things on that. One, I didn't get to talk to you about before, but that made you think about it. So sometimes the media is going to come in with an inherently negative premise, right? Which is like what a lot of people expect. It could be positive, it could be negative. If it is negative, we talk about reframe, recite, reinforce. So basically our goal is to find the positive intent of the question they ask and reframe it.
Got it.
Right? Then you recite your key messages. You reinforce them, and then you stop, right?
Okay.
So if that plausible interview that we were just talking about, they came in and they said, Jon, we're doing an interview series on businesses in Philadelphia, and we've actually found out that these smaller businesses or that video businesses are dying in Philadelphia.
Oh no!
What's your response? Right? I'm completely making this up.
This isn't happening.
This is not.
I'm like Googling. Is this happening?
Is this happening? Right. So you would never first repeat the negative question that they just asked, right? It's very natural to be like, well, that's not true, or if you're saying this, and we always say if you're defending, you're losing. But the best way to start, right, is reframing, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got all these back pocket phrases to do that, right? So you could say, let me give you the bigger picture here. In Philadelphia, there are, 800 active small businesses in the video space. We actually, at Video City Productions, have 5% of the market. I'm making all these numbers up.
Right.
Let me tell you why. Then you recite your key points. And then you stop, right? So there's always a way to reframe the original question. So again, you're not the victim and you have control.
Okay.
And to what your second point, it goes into preparedness, right? So the more you do it, right, we figure out your messages, the better you are and the more comfortable you are. And I think I'd love to hear this from you because a lot of times, we train people and then it's at first, right? It feels very natural. You're actually you've memorized it almost. So you can see that on video, right?
Yes.
Because it's not natural. So I would love to hear from you. Maybe they're hitting the right messages, right? But it feels like a rote exercise or it feels so rehearsed.
For sure. So I think that's where our two paths differentiate in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. I'm in the own media space, right? So we have a little bit, for example, when we do interviews with folks, right? And a lot of times I get this question, hey, I will work with the client up front on the pre-production side to figure out their target audience, their messaging, all those different things. And then we'll build out the questions.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, great, I'm going to send these questions to the interviewees ahead of time. And I go, don't.
Interesting.
Please don't send them the questions because what they're going to do is exactly what you said. They're going to read them. God forbid they're going to write down their answers. And then they're going to try to memorize them. And then they're going to spend the entire interview not having a conversation with me, right? But trying to remember what they wrote down on their way to the interview. And that's going to sound robotic. It's going to sound unnatural. It's going to sound inauthentic. So there's a balance there. On the flip side, I will say, hey, these 3 questions are around specific metrics or surveys or data that they need to know and have prepared. Just ask them about that. Don't send them the question. Just tell them to make sure that they know this information, right? So that's one of the areas where we would differentiate because I don't want them over. Now, it also depends on the person. So if this is someone that I've interviewed countless times, they're really comfortable and confident on camera, I'm not worried about those things. They can be more prepared. But a lot of times that means that they've done this before. They've seen footage of themselves doing it, probably not great. And I know you have a funny story about that. We should probably share. And then they've reviewed that and then done it again, right? So practice makes perfect.
Yeah. I think I've shared with you before that when we first do a media training, we have these kind of larger sessions. We show this really funny video that we dug up of Steve Jobs. And it's Steve Jobs, I'm not sure if it's 70s or early 80s. But I mean, we use him all the time as an example of the power of why and these really powerful speeches. But if you saw him back in the 80s, it's one of his first interviews. And he's like, oh my gosh, it's me on camera. Look, oh my gosh, I'm on the big screen. And he's sweating. And our whole, everyone's oh my gosh, is that Steve Jobs? And our whole purpose of showing that video is to say, practice makes perfect, right? He became one of the most effective communicators, arguably. But he didn't start off like that. And most people don't. And, I would also say, I really love the fact that you say, I don't want them to see the actual questions. I want them to know the direction because that dovetails exactly into what we do with the media. The media does not give us questions beforehand.
Right. You have no idea what you're walking into.
Right. I mean, part of our role as the PR agency is to say, can you give me a sense of the direction of your interview, the kinds of the kinds of information that you're looking for, other sources you're talking to? We can ask that.
And to be clear, this is because you are setting up this opportunity for your clients and you're already talking to the media.
Right. We're talking to the media. We're the intermediary, but they're not going to give us the questions before. So our job is to kind of look at their coverage, look at the kinds of interviews they've done in the past, get some information, and then help guide our clients. But also, we're also taking away the nerves because, again, they're going to be controlling the interview because they have this master message mapped. And then hopefully it's so kind of second nature because they've done it so much that it feels really natural to them, which is what you do as well, right?
No, that's exactly right. I actually, as an anecdote, it's a funny story. And if she's watching this, she's thanked me multiple times for this experience. So it's a few years ago, big philanthropist in the area. She had to have the questions up front and had to script her responses and had to have the paper in her hands holding it for the interview. And of course that's going to look scripted. There's a lot of looking down and it was a struggle. So I said to her in the interview, I said, I'm going to make 2 videos for you. I will do your scripted version. And then you have to do just a freestyle interview with me. And I will cut them both for you and show them to you. And you get to pick the one you like more. And she was like, begrudgingly. Okay, fine.
Love
and of
that.
course, she looked at both and then called me on the phone and said, thank you. Obviously, the one where she was speaking from the heart and just talking to the interview was better than the one where she was like, white knuckling a piece of paper and reading from it. And so I think that that's one of the again, it's one of those things where maybe, and I hate saying this because I hate using the word trust, but trust the experts that you're working with too, right? Because I wonder if you run into this a lot where you're coaching folks on the media strategy and how to handle these situations, and they are experts in their space and they're going, no, I need to message it this way and I need to say this and I need to say that. Do you find that you're having that sort of to overcome that, or are they, by the time they're coming to you, they're usually like, we know we need help?
You know what? We media train everyone from at all different positions, right, in a company, right? Yeah. Everyone from the CEO to just people that are working or advocates for the company, right? And it, depending on who you are, it's a little bit different. But I would say no matter how good you are, you can get better.
Yep.
Everybody can use training, right? And we've even taught some of our clients, we do these train the trainer exercises where we teach their internal marketing teams to do it kind of so that they can cascade it, right? But it has to be a collaborative process. I'm sure through the years there could be skepticism, but I think that when anyone goes through the process, it's always just beneficial, right? Because they're looking at the opportunity differently. They're learning something, and then they're getting to practice, right? At the end. We put on our reporter hats at the end. We ask them questions as a reporter. It's so funny. Like, I will literally be doing the training, and then all of a sudden I'll put on some like fake glasses, turn around, and I'll be like, hi, this is Sarah Ross. I'm here from like this made up news station. And they're like, sometimes they get nervous. Right. And it's like, I've been with you for 2 hours and now, you know what I mean? Because all of a sudden. It's like
very Clark Kent Superman thing.
Literally, all of a sudden I'm the reporter. So I think once you go through that exercise, but I would say most people are super. It's a collaborative process, and they're, kind of excited to learn.
Sure.
And there's a difference. I think you do kind of the first big session where you're trying to impart all the information, and then you actually media train them on specific opportunities as they come.
Right.
So they have the context of like how they should be doing it, how to think about it, but then you actually get to practice for that specific opportunity, which makes them feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I have a separate quick question on that. So one of the tools that I like to use when I interview somebody is to go to anecdotes. It will be almost always in my question set is tell me a story about a time, or tell me an anecdote, or storytelling is key.
Yep.
But I imagine in a world where you're training somebody to talk to, specifically the media, and they're taking a 5-second soundbite, right, from something somebody said in a 10-minute interview. If you go on some tangent about this story that's supposed to be analogous or making, God forbid, a metaphor or analogy around your thing, and they just pull from that analogy.
Sure.
Have you run into that situation where you're trying to keep them under control more, where because we're going to edit this, we can make mistakes, right? I can have you, but you don't have control once the content's in the, with the media. So how do you feel about that in terms of storytelling? Because it's like anecdotes are great. I think they're really powerful, but they can kind of be used for evil, I feel like, if they're unwieldy.
No, I think that's such a great question and a great point. I think everything that we do, both of us, right, it's all about story power, right? And we always say, make it personal, make it visual, make it visceral. Don't forget emotion, right?
Yes.
But the package that comes in has to be concise, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to do all those things, but with no more than 3 points in the middle of it. So start with your high level, like contextual
illumination. Right?
Thank you. You've already. You're a great student. And then there's the 3. Then we say give 3 key messages, right? Yeah. And maybe it can be stats or statistics or numbers, and then that's kind of level 2.
Yeah.
Those 3. And we also say like round up, extrapolate, right? So that people understand what that number actually means.
Sure.
And then bring that to life through color, right? Through a story. But do it in a concise way that's actually bringing those 3 key points to life. And also for organizations, you can start high. Usually you start, whether I work with a lot of nonprofits, so maybe they're giving like clinical information.
Right.
But then they can say, let me tell you what we're seeing on the front lines every day. Or let me tell you a story that really brings this to life. And that's when you get to sell your story power. So I think story power, emotion, rich detail, all really important. In fact, that's what changes you again from being the victim to actually controlling the interview. But putting it in a package where you're leading with that beginning contextual message, getting maybe those 3 key messages, and then closing with that call to action or whatever it is you want to leave listeners, viewers, readers with is really important.
I want to pivot for a second to authenticity.
Yeah.
So there was something you said to me off camera before that just popped into my head, and I'll give a little context and then pass the mic to you. So we talk a lot about authenticity being so key in whatever you're creating in terms of content. And obviously, if you're doing a brand film, right, everybody watching it knows that this is essentially a commercial for your business, that there's going to be a certain level of polish, et cetera. But when it comes to testimonials, there's this kind of interesting landscape now. So we do a lot of, and have for years done, stated professional interview testimonials, right? So let's say you bring in client testimonials to camera interview, lights, a director, and we're going to get really nice content. But you're seeing a lot in the marketing space, folks that are also getting that like cell phone UGC style testimonial for their business or something on like a Zoom recording, right?
Yeah.
And as a creator, I talk a lot of times to clients strategically and go, look, I'm not going to just say because that's lower quality, it's bad.
Sure.
There's an authenticity and inherent trust that comes in like, oh, that doesn't look overly produced. That must be more authentic, right? But you have to be tactical about when you use these tools.
Yes.
So that's from the video world.
Interesting.
In your space, we had talked about this off camera on the authenticity front, where you were talking about crisis management, and you mentioned there, somebody coming too polished, too stated, too corporate, and not sort of feeling authentic to the problem they were solving. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
So can you hit that for us so that people understand sort of the differentiation in another version of authenticity?
Yeah, I love the question too. I was listening to a lot of your podcasts before I came on today, Jon. And
I keep dusting your shoulder off.
No, and I love that that you talk about authenticity, because I think ultimately people, we say like you can be a brand or you can take a stand, and we also know that like people care about companies that have values and people that espouse those values, right? That they can kind of sync up to, right? And that's in every day when they're doing good, and then in crisis when things go wrong, right? What helps to make somebody feel like, okay, I'm going to trust this person or this company again, right? And for us, when we're talking about crisis, we talk about validating concern and controlling the narrative. And how do you do that, right? So what we've seen kind of evolve in that space is the role of like the video from the CEO. And a really good example of that is like years ago, this was with JetBlue. There was a day that like a plane got stuck on the tarmac for close to 24 hours, right? And like, it was horrible. It was probably 10 years ago at this point.
Sure.
And I think what people expected was, a corporate press release that came out and said,
sorry,
these are the reasons this happened. It won't happen again, right?
Sure.
Instead, the JetBlue CEO came on camera. First of all, he looked awful, which was great. He looked tired. He looked like, his shirt was kind of unbuttoned. His hair was a little messy. And, in the context of validating concern, controlling, show action, control the narrative, right? Like first of all, he had that humanity and that authenticity of like, this has been a really rough night and day, right? First, so he's starting from that premise, right? Then he went into the messages about like, this will never happen again, and here's how we're gonna do better, right? And people watched it and were like, okay, I connect with that, right? So I think that there is, in any situation, right, whether it's a crisis or just a brand anthem video, you're trying to figure out what's going to speak to your audience. How are we going to reach our key audiences on the channels they're already using, is what we always say in marketing, right? You know what I mean? And I think there's like a place for all of this. So like when you're talking about kind of, the iPhone video, right? Like, for social media, for example, that's great. These day in the lives are connecting people to, the brands, right? For maybe like a larger, I would ask you this, like a major brand anthem video, you might want a little more of that polish, but there's lots of video series that we're seeing on people's websites that you're getting to cut through the clutter of problems or issues, and maybe that's a more appropriate format. So I would kind of come back to you, but I think really trying to, whether it's a problem or a solution, what feels like the right format, medium, you know what I mean? And, and I would like ask you about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that it comes back. Authenticity really bleeds into trust. They're essentially, whether they're one and the same or they're connected, like that's that piece. Authenticity is all about trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to get without saying, trust me, right? Don't say trust me. This is not effective.
Right.
And I think that's where, if you have it's all about intention. And we actually talked about this with before camera, before recording, talking about intention. And so we should hit that too.
Yeah.
But being intentional. So in the JetBlue, CEO example, whether that was intentional, literally they disheveled him to make it look more believable, or he really looked like that, doesn't matter. There was intention behind it to the degree that it was authentic to the audience and they trusted him, right? And so I think that now let's go into your marketing strategy. Well, there's a couple different pieces to it, but okay, if I make a brand film, if I show up and your brand film is shot on an iPhone, right? And I'm about to buy expensive services or products from you, right?
Yep.
Am I going to trust you? If your website looks disheveled or it looks, like it's all Arial font, or it looks like it's thoughtful and those things build trust, because now I've made a decision that, okay, this company has invested in themselves. I can trust them. On the top of the funnel, when you think about a sales funnel, that first experience that got me in the door, if it's a testimonial, I'm probably going to trust somebody that looks like they made this on their phone because they loved the jacket or service or whatever that you offered so much that they just had to share it with the world, whether it's paid UGC content or it's authentic. Doesn't matter. That feels like I'm going to trust that more. But once I get to the destination of like, okay, now I'm further down the funnel, I might buy. If I want to trust you, I need to know that like you're going to actually follow through on your promises. You have an actual company, whatever. That's usually indicated by having invested in something that looks like something that's higher brand. I think we run into that a lot with this video podcast space that we use not just for our own podcast, but obviously for our clients that come in here to record content. And I think that a lot of our target audience are folks that they have an established enough brand that they're not going to be okay with putting out content of themselves that's on a cell phone as they're walking down the street, right? They also maybe aren't ready or ever interested in investing in a big studio space with 7 cameras and microphones and this whole thing to create the content themselves. So this is where, like, when we developed this space, that was who we were thinking about. It's folks that aren't going to just grab a microphone and an iPhone and sit in like a corner of like a room and record a piece of content and put video out that like of their brand because of trust and authenticity. So I went in a couple different directions.
I think it's really interesting. And so at Braithwaite, just at a high level, we work with all different types of clients, B2B, B2C. I focus personally on the consumer and nonprofit clients, right? And I think when you're thinking about nonprofits, right? So companies, like organizations that are really exist to serve others and are really mission driven. You can almost like imagine in your mind, like, you're helping the people with the iPhone, you know what I mean? Cutting that in, no matter how big or small the video is. But, and this is a question to you, but I actually think it works on the B2B side as well, because these companies that ultimately that they're out in the community or they have the foundations, there's probably a role also for that, right? Within it. I think when you're but it just depends on like the content and the kind of video that you're doing. And I think how many videos, what are you sharing with, prospective clients? What are you sharing from like a foundation perspective? So do you run into like, when you're putting together a video proposal, like they want to actually understand like exactly like how the videos are going to be cut together, what the end result's going to look like how much do you give them that vision first, and how much is it kind of something that evolves as you're working with them?
So it's really tough because a lot of that is the concept development, right? Which normally is a service, right? It's something that you charge for, but some of that has to happen up front so we understand what we're coming into and doing. I think, again, it always comes back to this word of intention. I think that a lot of times, specifically in the nonprofit space, and we work in a lot, you can tell when we're using photos or the iPhone asset in a video or in your marketing or whatever, because we didn't want to invest in the proper asset and it's a filler versus it's intentional, right? And I think that that's what we try to coach clients through. Like we are all about an ROI. So anytime I'm talking to a nonprofit, the first place I'm starting with is that if this video doesn't make you more money than it cost you to make, right? And whatever that, I should really say that goal. So we use a lot of Brene Brown around here. So like, what does success look like, right? So if success looks like more volunteers, if success looks like more donations, more donors, whatever, if this doesn't help you get more of that than when you started, it wasn't worth making and we shouldn't do it, right? So I think that, but being intentional is how you're going to get there. So we run into that a lot. We run into a lot of, I think after the whole, the ice bucket challenge. And if you remember, they
of
made
course,
all that
of course,
money,
yeah.
but then they got in a lot of heat. Somebody had to PR them through that, I'm sure. They got in a lot of heat because they were paying their executives a lot of money, and it was relative to what their mission are. And so a lot of nonprofits are so conscientious around that. And everyone we talk to, like, we don't want to spend too much money on this. We don't want to spend, it's got to be mission forward.
Sure.
But there's another part of that story, which is you can't be mission forward if you aren't investing in these things that's going to drive donations and things like that. So I think the main answer is ROI. And I think that the way to get there is being intentional. So why are we trying to do it? Now, actually, fun story, one of my favorite projects that we worked on that is the opposite of high production. It was all done on Zoom. So this is, I don't know who wants to talk about COVID anymore, but it was like, we had a nonprofit. They were doing a fundraising gala. I think it was maybe early April was when everything was happening, when the gala was launching. But COVID was like that March, right? So they reached out and they were like, how do we do this? And they're an educational organization. So they wanted to honor their teachers who had been like on the front lines, really helping his students, et cetera. And we leaned into, now everyone's like, you look at Zoom content now that pops up on your screen and you just try to swipe past it because it's just so played out. At the time, everyone's on Zoom. We're all kind of, figuring that out. And our concept was, there was Zoom bombing was happening at the time, if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
So we leveraged that and we said, we're going to create a video where we create a fake faculty meeting, bring all the faculty on, and then we're going to Zoom bomb them with people to say positive things, right? But we wanted this video to go well, and you can't predict a lot of things that were going on Zoom. So we had a staged meeting ahead of time with our actors. They all read scripted lines. And then we actually filmed, the full gallery mode or whatever of them Zoom bombing this meeting. And you had teachers crying. You had, parents and community leaders and students that were coming in and saying thank you to the teachers. And, we would cut to these little squares of teachers crying, whatever. And then we played that and we created this whole piece. And it's really powerful. It's done. There was not a single nice one of my cameras that are all back there. Not one of my cameras were used. It was all about using the medium and using the right intention to create this piece. So I think that's my point around quality versus it's got to be intentional.
Well, I know you said no one wants to talk about COVID, but that made me think of a couple things. The role that video plays, even in PR, right, has evolved. And COVID actually had a really specific kind of, I think, trigger. So I saw a couple things happen that have kind of continued since then, right? So one was the virtual press conference, right? So think of a typical press conference, right? You go to City Hall or wherever, you're making a major announcement for your company. Couldn't do that. So you were doing it virtually, right? And you had to have obviously like it's a private, Zoom room or whatever it is. But you're also inviting the media to join virtually, right? And that kind of changed the whole premise, right? And it gave you a little bit more control because it was like, the media wasn't sitting right in front of you, right? And we had a specific time at the end where we're going to leave 15 minutes at the end of this conference. There's going to be these remarks for questions, right? So it's a different way to interact that kind of video offered, right? But we've seen that kind of does continue. There's always been virtual conferences and things, but a virtual press conference now has become something that is possible, right? And allows people and media locally and nationally actually to join in different ways, right? So we kind of saw that as like a COVID impetus, right?
Do you ever see anybody blame, like if you were trying to stall to answer a question and you could just blame, just stutter on Zoom? Just do that. I'm sorry, what?
Right.
And then you just kind of think.
Like the connectivity issues, right? I could see it happening.
What have you done with $300 million of your budget? Let me just...
right.
I'll get right to that.
It sounds like a good movie.
That would be,
right? I feel like I could see that happening. But we've seen that. I've seen the video, kind of the video, like the video coming out from the CEO that we were talking about, whether like kind of in good or bad. But we've seen that kind of video has continued to play a larger role. In PR, and actually now, newsrooms are getting smaller or they're busier. So a lot of times, like if we have an event for a client, we take, going back to that iPhone, right? We take B-roll and we send it to the news stations and they'll use
And you
it
get to control it,
because
yeah.
it's so important, right? Like we know that people, they want photos, but they want video, right? So I think we've just seen the role evolve, and we used to call it like citizen journalism before social media had the role that it does now, right? Because you know what I mean? But it used to be like, you know, if you could get some of your own footage and get it right, and get it back. We talked about it like
on your
that.
Motorola Razr.
Right, exactly. But you know, I think that like the role that video plays, you know, all around in owned media, in earned media, in social media as well, like it's just become so powerful, right?
Let me ask you this, because one of the things that we started doing that was, again, born from that time is elevating people's Zoom presence and coupling that into a content creation tool. So we actually have a whole package of recommended camera, ring light, podcast microphone, how to just really elevate your quality. And it's a huge differentiator. Maybe we'll even put it up on screen, an example of, I have one of these at-home setups. A lot of our clients have done them. We've actually had them outfitted in Zoom rooms where, you know, when you have those breakout Zoom rooms, instead of it just being a closed, quiet room, there's actually camera systems, et cetera. And I think that our pitch to clients is, well, one, if most of your business development has switched now to Zoom, to Teams, to whatever, that's how you're showing up. And it's kind of the equivalent of showing up in like raggedy, you know, regular clothes versus like a nice suit or dress. So that was one of the things. And the other things is it empowers you to create content in an elevated way. But I wanted to ask you, thinking about those Zoom conferences, et cetera, how much does that matter of like, you know, the laptop sitting on the table looking up your nose versus having like a nice presentation when you're sitting on Zoom from the media perspective?
You know, I actually, you know, there's a local TV news program that we often get our clients on, and it's always actually through Zoom, right? So the client is talking to the reporter through a Zoom link, and then it shows up 2 hours later on that local TV station, right? And that is, it feels different, right, from being in the studio, but actually it does a couple things. One, it causes our clients to need to kind of brand themselves. So you have to think about the environment that you're in for the interview. You have to think about like, is there a company sign behind you? Are you wearing like, what's appropriate, right? Are you wearing like something that's representing your company, or are you just, you know what I mean, like dressed for a more formal interview, right? But I think it's just become so part of our day to day that it's actually it's a medium that that the newsrooms are using more and more. So it used to be like you have to go into the studio, which still happens, but it's a really, I mean, it's something they're doing every day. It's part of the programming, and then viewers are used to seeing it, right? So I think when we prepare our clients for interviews, it has to always be a piece of it. It's always in person and virtual. And you have to be more aware of certain things when it's virtual and more aware of certain things when it's in person, right? And I think it's that balance that this is a part of the world that's not going away. It's an effective tool. It helps connect people, right? Because you can be anywhere. You know, our clients can do an interview and they can be on vacation. Not that that happens a lot, but they could. Do you know what I mean? But then it's kind of branding your space, being aware of how you're sharing your message, what you're saying effectively, right? Virtually. So I think it's just become kind of, I've, you know, I started this interview by saying I've been here for 20 years. I've watched the media landscape evolve in so many ways. It's so, we also don't view it in silos, right? Like it used to be like, there's PR and there's advertising, you know what I mean? And it's all, you know what I mean? And we view it really as an intersection, right? That's why we do like this integrated media. And I think, you know, a tool and a tactic to get you there on all fronts, right? I started by talking that we do earned, owned, paid, shared. Video is a massive part of all of that, right? So I think like the key takeaway there is you got to be ready to be on camera, right? You have to be aware of, you know, your key messages, and then your pitch, your pace, your poise, like, you know what I mean? All of that, which goes into what you do as well.
What do you do for folks that, I just had somebody in here the other day that it's in advertising, by the way, and they're like, I don't like being on camera. Right. What do you do about the folks, the leaders that you have to work with that really just don't like it? Is it like, suck it up? Is it, what do we do to get people to embrace that?
I think that, you know, I think that there's obviously people naturally that just like to speak, right? There's a lot of, you hear a lot of that too with, because we do presentation training, public speaking training, like I don't like public speaking, right? Or I don't like this. And part of that just comes from a fear of the unknown again, and just not being confident and comfortable, right? So I think part of it is we start from the premise, and going back to authenticity, of kind of leaning into who you are naturally. like I talk with my hands. I think there was like an old school of thought that don't, right? Like sit on your hands straight up. But now it's actually like lean into what makes you you.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? So first of all, kind of stripping away some of the false premise that people have ingrained of like, I'm not standing up straight, or I'm going to need this podium. And what if the technology doesn't work? Or what if I say too much or this, right? So it's like kind of getting people to feel, first of all, comfortable. We're going to take who you are naturally. Then we're going to help you effectively communicate the messages that you need to. And then depending who you are in the company, if you're the CEO of the company, you need to effectively communicate your brand messages.
Sure.
But, if you work for the company in a different role, and you're really serving people in the community every day, you have a different place in the interview, right? They want your firsthand experience. They want your humanity. They want, you know what I mean? So it's not changing people. And I think that's part of it. It's not changing who you are. It's getting you to feel comfortable in who you are, the role you serve for that company, and then the messages that make sense coming from you. And once people realize that, I think it changes the whole kind of, oh, well, this could be fun.
I love that. I love that because I think the way that I've always sort of explained that to folks, and it's really more explaining the differentiation between being on stage and being on camera.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of folks put on their on stage voice for everything.
Right.
And one of the things I say every time I do an interview, if you've done multiple interviews with me, you have heard these jokes and these things. Yeah. But one of them that I always say is, we're about to have a conversation. It's conversational. I want you to pretend like we're having your favorite drink. It could be a coffee, it could be a beer, it could be something stronger than that. But in your mind, just pretend that's what we're doing, because video is so much more intimate in terms of I don't need to project in the way that I'm doing my TED Talk or speaking, on the steps in front of City Hall. In that environment, right, there's all the things that we've learned in speech class in school, right? You have to try to move your eyes around, make eye contact, get off the paper. There are things that are important to do so that you're not just like closed off reading off a podium paper, right? But when it's in video, it goes from up here to here to a talk, right? And I find that one of the things I actually love specifically about video podcasting that got me really excited about this medium is that, and notice I said video podcasting, not podcasting. We can talk about that maybe separately, but
I'd love to.
This democratizes content creation. I've seen people who have really struggled in an off-camera interview, the Barbara Walters style, right? Where somebody's asking them questions. And because you still feel kind of isolated and alone.
Yeah.
I've seen people really struggle with remembering a script. That's usually one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
Reading from a prompter. This environment for just about everybody, we all talk. We're all talking every day. And the more you embrace that in this environment, the better you do.
Well, I think a lot of what you're talking about is how to make people feel comfortable.
Yes.
And, one of the things we show, we show both in media training and presentation training, is we'll go to one of the big, like Tonight Show, or, you know what I mean? One of the late night hosts, right? One of the things they do is before the show starts, they come out and they talk to the crowd for about 20 minutes, right? So you've got if you ever gotten to go to Jimmy Fallon, I haven't, you know what I mean? But they all do this, right? They come out, they talk to the crowd, they warm the crowd up. They say where are you from? Who's, you know what I mean? Who's here from Philadelphia? Who's ever been to this before? Who are you excited to see tonight? So by the time they're back, the crowd is warmed up. They feel comfortable. There's this kind of connection they've already created. What you're doing with people that you're working with is you're creating this connection first. You're making them feel comfortable. They're just talking, right? And when you take that level of fear away, then they can, again, lean into their natural abilities and just have a conversation, right?
Yep.
So I think there's always taking away that wall. We even say, when you're giving a speech, when we're talking about presentation training, take away the podium. It's a physical barrier between you and the audience, right? And we all, you know what I mean? And if there's the opportunity you're giving a speech to talk to the audience first, we recommend that too, because it's going to make you comfortable and it's going to make the people you're talking to comfortable. Because I think there's also that too, especially, if you're giving a presentation, you want to know what the people are thinking that are watching it.
Sure.
And you're wondering if you're getting what kind of reaction you're getting, right? So if you can kind of in the beginning set the premise of there's this familiarity, and these are just friends and I'm just going to tell them something really meaningful.
Yeah.
That's really important.
That feedback is so critical. And I think that it's a good interviewer skill,
Yeah.
But it is something to cultivate if you're a presenter too.
Yeah.
If you remember, I think a really good example of this is, we keep bringing up COVID, but there was like the stand-up comics that tried to do comedy in COVID without an audience.
Yes.
And they were, somebody that would
impossible.
Crush in front of an audience.
Right.
Was dying on a vine, right? And you were watching these. I mean, these are arena selling comics that can't figure it out because you have to have, it's a relationship. Right. And then so I think that's a really great example of, I love the idea of getting out from behind the podium.
Yeah.
I think that as a on the video side, we've had that situation where obviously you still want to put parameters around all of this, right?
That, yeah.
So I think that's, I've had the roving talent that they're the TED talker that likes to go out into the crowd and all of a sudden they're in like there's no lights out there, they're in dark space, they're hiding in the eaves, and you're just like, can you please stay at least within the tape markers? Like that's where the light is. Sure. But you're absolutely right. I think that allowing yourself to be yourself more, to build that relationship, to all of that creates, I think it comes back to, if you're intentional about it, you create authenticity and that will build trust. And when you have that trust, and it's a two-way street, when it's a speech, right? If you have that trust with the audience, if you build that relationship connection, you have trust and they have trust. I think that it probably is a feedback loop that elevates everybody, makes it more comfortable.
100%. And I think for whether you're talking to the media, whether you're giving a presentation, whether you're doing like a brand and some video, having that level of like trust and authenticity is really important. And then feeling just really comfortable in the messages that you're sharing, right? So I think it's this two-way of, I know what I need to say today, right? And I've done it. I've practiced it so many times that I feel good about it. And then I feel comfortable with the person I'm delivering it to or the person I'm working with. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because I feel like I have it in my mind and then my nerves are gone and I'm able to just effectively communicate those messages. So, there's so much to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So we talked about a lot today. I want to end on actionable piece of advice. We got to do the value exchange. I think a lot of value has been exchanged today. I hope people agree.
Yeah.
What is one thing? This is like too limiting after everything we said. We always do everything in rules of threes, and I'm going to limit you to one thing. What's one thing that somebody is, maybe about to deal with crisis? You can choose your own adventure, Sarah. So somebody's about to deal, with crisis, or somebody's about to go present, or whatever that is. What's one thing that they can do right now to help set them up for better success in that situation? What's like the first thing?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is to take away every preconceived notion that you have about how scary this is going to be and understand that there is a preparedness and a method. So if you're dealing with a crisis, there's a method to dealing with the crisis. We're going to validate concern, show action, control the narrative. And we're going to do that in a very specific way. If you're going to be giving an interview, you're going to be thinking of what is that key message map, right? What are those things that I need, those key messages I want to deliver, and who am I talking to? And I'm going to do it through that context message, brand, and message, call to action. Yep. If you're doing a presentation, we didn't get to dive into this too much, but we're going to start with a wow opener. We're going to have 3 key points, and we're going to have a really meaningful close. So I think starting from the premise of there is actually a formula that is going to help me do this effectively and meaningfully, and I can do it, right? And once I have an understanding of this, it's not going to be scary. It's actually going to be meaningful, right? Yeah. And that's going to guide me through the situation, and it's repeatable, right? Yes. So that's the other thing, is it can happen over and over again. So I gave you a long answer to one question, but I think understanding that there is an approach and a formula to effectively communicating and sharing, and once you feel comfortable with that, the rest comes into place.
Well, I love that, because I think that I would boil that down to sort of a growth mindset, right? And or just not a limiting mindset. And because I think that a lot of people start with, I'm not good at that, or I can't do that, or that's not my thing. And the idea is that if you realize there's a methodology and a process that you could follow, it can be your thing, right? You don't need to, I thought you were about to say fun in there, that you can find it could be fun, and then maybe you course correct it. I don't know, maybe I'm making that up. But I think that whether it doesn't have to be your favorite thing, but it can be something that you master and are strong in doing, right?
Yeah. And it can be fun. I mean, I think the crisis stuff, not so much, but everything else, you know what I mean? But I think present speaking and talking to media can be really fun, right? Because it's a chance for you to like effectively share the messages and own your messages and help control the narrative. Because that's what everyone's looking for. They're looking to control the narrative, right? And how do you do that? So once you eliminate the fear and feel excited about it, I actually think fun's a good word.
I love it. I'm gonna take for my one answer, I'm going to say something we haven't really talked about much, but it kind of boils down a lot of the principles that we've described, which is confidence. So specifically in my arena, when I'm interviewing somebody and I'm saying all these things, be conversational, be yourself. I can edit you to say things you didn't say, but I can't edit you to look comfortable on camera.
Yes.
Really, that boils down to, and we can fake confidence, right? That's anything somebody can do. I think that confidence is a great thing to think about when you're going into an interview. If you've never done this before, you're sitting down on camera, there's somebody who's about to ask you questions. We're in the space to, an owned media to support you, right? We're making a brand film for you. We're making a testimonial. We want you to succeed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that can help. So knowing that you're supported can help you feel more confident. But again, if you come in, you sit down in front of camera, you mess the words up, you get the lines wrong, you do, but you are confident in doing it, I promise that at the end of the day, we are going to get what we need to create a great piece of content.
Absolutely.
I love it. Sarah, this was a lot of fun. We got to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on to Beyond the Frame. And I hope everyone watching this learned a lot about the art of the interview and some options on how to improve.
Me too. Thank you so much.